And as we go on, let me reiterate, as I know I brought up a point that took some of you by surprise, and Brother Brad before class has asked some questions about that. I don't know, partially because I'm trying to concentrate on my lesson for this evening or whatever. I'm having a little bit of trouble understanding exactly what his import of his question is. But I want to get back with you and answer your question if anyone had overheard any of that discussion before, earlier on. But it has to do with verse 2 and the resurrection, whether it be that of the actual resurrection or the figurative resurrection, as was talked about with Ezekiel in the Valley of Dry Bones. So if any of you, like I said, I could tell by looks on your faces that took some of you by surprise. So if any of you have questions about that, I will do my best to get back with you about any of those types of questions. And be sure and get those questions answered. I will answer them to the best of my ability, which is limited at best. But I'll show you why and how I come to the conclusions I have come to, and as I reiterated last week, I'll reiterate again. I don't think there's any doctrinal issue with either view. But unless someone has a question about that, I want to move on, and we'll start in verse 3 this evening. As it says, "And they that are wise shall shine as the brightness as the firmament, and they that turn many to righteousness as stars forever and ever." Again, this figurative type of speech, as we have seen before in the book of Daniel, as we'll see in other prophets use it, is a type of speech that talks about these individuals that under oppression, under troublous times, rise to the occasion and do what God would have them to do, and sometimes even lose their lives in the service of God. And so their deeds are not forgotten. And so, as we talked about last week, there's no other lesson that we learn from all of this. As God's people, no matter what oppression comes upon us, we must stand firm. We can never give in. The words of the famous leader of Great Britain under World War II. We must never, 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 never give up. And Winston Churchill. Thank you very much. It's just so applicable to this situation. We can't give up. To give up would be to give up a heavenly home, something far better than anything that we can suffer here on earth. Okay. Now in verse 4, he says, But thou, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. All right, I think this is an interesting phrase. Shut up the words and seal the book. Any of you that have studied the Dead Sea Scrolls and how they found some of those scrolls that are found, do you know what condition they found them in? No, they weren't burnt. I mean, just what were they found inside of? What were the scrolls themselves found in? They were found in jars. Some of the scrolls were written on animal skins, and those were dipped in oil, olive oil, in order to preserve them. They were sealed in those types of containers, those jars, in order to preserve those things. There were many different types of scrolls. Some of them were hammered copper. Some of them were of papyrus, which degraded over time. And there was many different types of scrolls on many different types of writing things. But this kind of reminds me of this type of verbiage when we see shut up the words and seal the book. Preserve it. Keep it up. Now, why is that? It's because it's for the time of the end. Remember, these are for many days forward. These are not for now. This is for what? Hundreds of years. These things are going to take. These things are going to happen hundreds and hundreds of years old. So these things need to be preserved. Now, if we go all the way to the Revelation, in Revelation chapter 23 and verse 10, look what the Apostle John is told to do. And he said unto me, seal not the sayings of the prophecy of this book. For what reason? For the time is at hand. Remember, in the first chapter, in the first verse or two, he was told what about the revelation? It's not revelations, it is the revelation. These things must, what? Are going to happen years and hundreds of years and thousands of years in the future? These things must shortly come to pass. Okay, so just as John was told not to seal up the sayings of the prophecy of these books, of this book, because these need to be spread out. This needed to be told to everyone right now. It needed to be told to everyone very quickly, because these things were shortly to come to pass. Now, if we go back to Daniel, we see the opposite. Seal it up. Okay, it wasn't so much that it was to be kept from people. It's not, the idea is not here that people are not supposed to see it. It was to preserve these words. Keep them. Seal them up, because it's going to take place in many, many years. The book of Daniel is one of those books that have been attacked over and over and over by those who do not believe in the Word of God because of its accuracy. Its accuracy historically and many other things. Because if prophecy is true, then there must be someone who knows the future. That means there's a God, by the way. Haven't figured that one out. Okay. Verse 5, and then I, Daniel, looked, and behold, there stood two, one on one side of the banks of the river, and the other on the other side of the river, and the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river. How long shall it be to the end of these wonders? So Daniel is wondering, how long shall these things be? Remember, he was asked and was told about a bunch of things that was going to happen. This goes all the way back into chapter 11. Remember, all these things are going to happen. And remember, God's people were persecuted during part of this period of time. Okay. Verse 7. And I heard the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river. Now here's a man who is what? Where is he? He's standing above the water. He held up his right hand and his left up into heaven, and swore to him that liveth forever, that it shall be for times and a half. We've heard that before, haven't we? And we shall be accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people. All these things shall be finished. When will these things be finished?
When the holy people's power is scattered.
That's exactly right. The end of the book of Daniel doesn't go any further than 70 AD. When God's people are destroyed, when the Mosaic Commonwealth, when the Jewish Commonwealth is destroyed, it's done. There's nothing more here out of Daniel. We're just talking about the book of Daniel. Now, there's individuals who tried to make more out of 70 AD than there is. And I'm still trying to figure out what their purpose is, because none of what they say makes sense to me. Those that are the realized eschatologists, I can't make heads or tails of it. It makes no sense whatsoever at all. The more I read of it, the more confused I become. The implications of their doctrine, to me, I have no other word but goofy. Honestly, I don't. I'm trying to understand it because I want to understand why people do some of the things they do. But this one, I cannot get it. I can't get my arms around it, because it is just, but people do what people do. Nonetheless, this is what the end of it all is, okay? So, he talks about for time, times, and a half. What have we talked about that time, times, and a half means? In every place that we have seen it, even in the book of Revelation, remember, it talks about a time of persecution of God's people. And it's talked about in several different ways. It can be talked about the number of days. It can be talked about in the number of months. Remember 42 months in the book of Revelation? And it'll be talked about in the number of days here at the end. Okay? But always, however it is talked about, it talks about a time of persecution for God's people. They'll be persecuted for a period of time, but there's always an end to it. So hang on. And persecution purifies. Doesn't the New Testament tell us that we will escape as if by fire? As if through fire? Is this any kind of something new to us as Christians? That type of thinking, that type of idea, that we are going to be tried, that we are going to be tested? Yeah, Jesus said that everything's going to be hunky-dory for all Christians. You come unto me, all ye that labor, and everything's going to be fine, right? Isn't that what he told his disciples? Or did he tell his disciples, if they hated me, they are going to hate you and persecute you? Okay? So again, they're being warned there's going to be a time of persecution for this, but righteous people will run through it. Again, everything is accomplished that Daniel talks about when there's the scattering of the holy people, which we have defined as who? The nation of Israel. Okay? Then all these things are finished. Okay, verse 8, Daniel doesn't fully understand. So, oh Lord, what will the ends of these things be? He doesn't fully understand yet. Well, would you want to? You see this persecution, you understand that a lot of things are going to be happening, but doesn't the New Testament also tell us about that plan of salvation that even the Old Testament prophets long to look into? They prophesied about things that they didn't fully understand. We now, looking back, can see some things very clearly. They couldn't. But yet they were blessed with these wonderful prophecies that you and I now can go back and look at. All right. He says, in verse 9, he says, "Go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed up till the time of the end." What's the time of the end? Well, it could be 70 AD when the people were, when the Israelite people were completely scattered and destroyed, that Jewish commonwealth was destroyed, or it could be the individual things that he talked about in each particular nation that would rise up, power that would rise up. There were situations that would follow in each particular one of these nations, whether it be the Medo-Persian or it would be the Greek. Things would happen under these, all right? Verse 10, "Many shall be purified and made white and tried." Isn't that what we just talked about? "But the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand." What did Jesus say? "He who has ears to hear, let him hear." People will twist and manipulate the scriptures any way they want. But wise individuals lets the scriptures interpret themselves, and they follow God's will the way it is. But if you want to believe a particular doctrine, you'll twist it the way you want it to be. And so the wicked do wickedly. That's just the way they do. You're not going to stop them. It's always been that way, and it always will be that way. There is nothing new under the sun. Verse 11, "And from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination that shall make desolate set up, there shall be 2,390 days." That's the time, times, and half a time. It's another way of saying 3.5. That's that period of persecution that we were talking about. Again, this is part of the reason in the latter part of chapter 11, I believe we're still talking about Antiochus Epiphanes. This is that period of that persecution. Verse 12, "Blessed he that waiteth and come to the 3,305 days." Now what does that mean? Well, it's beyond the 3.5. After the persecution is over. If the 3.5 is the time of persecution, this is now beyond the persecution and it's over. Remember, that individual was going to come to his end and none could help him. So hang on. Buckle up, Buttercup. It's not going to be easy. It's amazing to me that the roughest times in our lives sometimes teach us the most. Isn't that true for all of us? It is the truth. Now, not a single one of us would wish some of the worst times that we've gone through on any other individual. But when we come through the other side, we have tools that we didn't have to begin with. Sometimes God knows what's best for us and his people. All right, now verse 13, the end of the chapter. But go thy way until the end be, for thou shalt rest and stand in thy lot at the end of days. Each and every one of us will stand in our lot at the end of days. There will be a time that we will have to give an account for the things, for the deeds done in the body. I don't really think Daniel had much to worry about, do you? But I believe there was a lot of Jews in Daniel's day and after Daniel's day and during the days of Nehemiah and the days of Ezra and a lot of times after that that would have to. Don't you? Because the Bible tells me so. And that is written for you and I's admonition and learning. If they can do it, so can we. If they can fall away, so can we. It is our responsibility to keep the church pure, to teach the truth, to endure persecution. No matter what man tells us to teach about homosexuality, about abortion, about whatever is coming down the pike, because there's going to be something else, we have to teach the truth. And we have to stand firm on it. I remember it wasn't too many years ago that we were trying to accept anybody and everybody on any kind of marriage, whatever their past marriages were, that was just supposed to be forgotten. But that's not God's marriage law. By the way, if you read Ezra and Nehemiah, they got in trouble for the same reason. Brethren, we have to do what we have to do in order to remain pure so that we can stand in our lot at the end of days and hear, well done, thou good and faithful servant. And then there is a time of rest. And I don't know about you, but some days I need some rest. I'm tired of this old body that hurts and complains and talks to me in ways that I wish they didn't talk to me. But there will be a day where there's a resurrection of the body, and I'll be given a body that doesn't do that anymore. But if I give up before that day, I'm going to wish I hadn't, because I'm going to be in a lot more pain than I can ever feel in this world. I have just a few more minutes before, unless anyone has any other questions about this chapter, or the book for that matter. Let's jump back to the old world empires. I wanted just to show you a few things. If we run back to our good buddy Antiochus Epiphanes, this is the king of the north here on my left, which would be also your left. And this will be this column here is the king of the south, which is Ptolemy the sixth. I can read. Stick with me. As you follow this down, and we're going to jump through that because we've talked about him way too much. We'll see that there is the rise of the Maccabean, the Maccabees. And during this period of time, there is, let's see, I jumped too far. Simon Maccabees in 142, the youngest son of Matthias, he will win Judean independence. Okay, this just gives you a little bit of history, and I'm going to take you right up to the Roman Empire, when the Roman Empire takes over, in both columns, by the way. So that will be Egypt and Syria. Okay. So notice from this point in time that the high priest's office now is an office that is given by rule, it's a political office. It's no longer necessarily an individual who follows the Mosaic law of a descendant of Aaron. Thank you. Yeah, so it's now a political office. So now he's Matthias takes over. His son will take over as the high priest. Then there's John Hyrcanus the first, and then however you pronounce this gentleman's name. But now he becomes king. So now they have a king on the throne. All right, and so to a Jew, this is extremely important. You can imagine how important this is, that now they have someone that has the title of king. Okay? This is 104 or 103 BC. And if you look in the far right corner, what's happening down in Egypt at this time is it's strange. One of the individuals, it's after Ptolemy the Fifth, he marries his sister. She has a daughter, and I don't know if it's by her brother or not. Her name is Cleopatra. There are several Cleopatras, by the way. He divorces Cleopatra, marries his niece. You remember the song, "I Am My Own Grandpa"? Well, this is pretty close to it. Okay. And that's about down in here, I believe it is, about 174 BC. So Cleopatra, yeah, this is when it is. Cleopatra then marries, after being divorced from Ptolemy the Fifth, she then marries her other brother, and they co-rule for a period of time, because it swaps rule, one person to another person, to back and forth. It's hard to keep up with. I mean, it is very difficult to keep up with. That's what I'm trying to show you here. He marries his niece here and takes her to wife. Can you imagine? And then Cleopatra leads a rebellion. She gets thrown out. She leads a rebellion. This is Cleopatra the Second, not Cleopatra the Third. Okay, I know that's hard to keep up with. And she drives them out of Egypt for a period of time. Then she is forced to flee Egypt, and she joins her other daughter, Cleopatra Thea. Are you keeping up with all this? And her son-in-law, Demetrius the Second Nicator. And then with the help of, and under pressure of Rome, they reconcile and they co-rule for a period of time. And then we come on down to another Bernice, and eventually we have Cleopatra the Seventh, which is the famous Cleopatra. And she has relationships, of course, with Julius Caesar and then Mark Antony. And they rebel against Rome, and of course that is the Battle of Actium, and it was their hope to set up an independent country, and independent rule doesn't work. They lose, and now at that point in time, which is 31 BC, so they lose, and then under Octavian, who becomes who? Caesar Augustus. Now everything is under Roman rule, and that's Egypt. Okay, so we come back up here, and remember we were going from one individual to another who takes the throne. Salome has two sons. She puts one son on as high priest and appoints him the kingship. Then he dies, and then she puts the younger brother, which starts a civil war. But then comes in this individual who's by the name of Pompey. This is about 63, 64 BC. He comes in and restores order in all of that area. He takes over Syria and Palestine, and from 63, now everything is under Roman rule. Pompey was a very powerful individual and well respected by the Roman Senate. If I remember correctly, Pompey walked into the Holy of Holies. He did not profane it as did as some of the other individuals did, but just walking into the Holy of Holies profaned it. But he did not, offer swine's blood or things of this nature to profane it in other ways. But he just walked in, and so it was a way of saying, "See, your God has no power." And so anyway, he from that point on, Pompey and the Roman Senate now says who is going to be the high priest and who is going to have power or have any say at all. So the reason I say this, and the reason I bring you into that point, if you want to look back at what I've shown you here, when you come to the New Testament, you remember there's two high priests. They take Jesus in the middle of the night to one, they take him in the morning to the other, which is the acting high priest at that point in time. And the reason being is Rome is the one that decides who's the high priest now. You don't do what we tell you to, then we'll just take you out of power and we'll put somebody else into place. And remember, one was the son-in-law of the other. So that was the reason why that was the kind of situation they had that we see in the New Testament. The New Testament doesn't explain any of this. Not that it really needs to, but that gives you a little background story to why things are the way they are when we see them in the New Testament.
It's too interesting that already at this point, even before Jesus had been born, acts by Pompey and others, even during the Maccabean period, showed that Jewish worship, the Jews had changed worship so much that God wasn't at the tabernacle anymore anyway. So
Correct.
when they, that it just shows that the faithful Jews that there were, they were on their own doing the best that they possibly could. But the Jewish system was basically, the worship system had already been destroyed already by the politics, and so, it just shows, as God told Moses, the old law is going to come to an end, and it basically did on its own. And so So when Jesus came on the scene, they were still under Judaism, but it wasn't what it had been, obviously.
And that also explains why there were so many sects of the Jews. There were those individuals that were trying to follow the law of Moses, but they'd gone so far as to make their own laws and things of this nature. So you had the, I don't know, 20 or 30 different sects.
And then they built
Right.
synagogues, obviously, during this time too.
Correct.
Which we read about in the New Testament, but we don't read where they got that authority. It's just something they did. So. the
But
tabernacle-
that became extremely important in the spreading of the gospel in the New Testament. Right. All right, my time is well spent. Yeah, I appreciate so much for you allowing me to teach the book of Daniel. It's always a rewarding study for me. I learn something each time I go through it, and I hope you found it rewarding for you as well. And so next week, Brother Charles will be starting whatever he's starting.
My intent was just we're done with the captivity, so we're going to go into the book of Ezra and see where they go next. I think I'm going to have about 6, half a quarter, so that should be about the right amount of time to get to the book of Ezra, and then I think that goes in, and then we'll.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your kind attention.